Welcome back to News in Focus. Now, a recent poll by the Institute of Race Relations is suggesting a potential change in the political shake-up of South Africa, with the DA edging past the ANC for the first time in IRR polling history. Now, conducted in the wake of the controversial VAT increase, the data reveals significant changes in voter sentiment, particularly on economic lines. Joining me now, I'd like to welcome from the IRR, Herman Pretorius. Herman, good day. Thank you so much for joining us here on News in Focus on Hilaal TV.
A great pleasure. Thank you, Faraz.
No, it's an absolute pleasure. I mean, quite interesting, Herman. I think what we want to get to the crux of is just how this poll was actually conducted in order for this data to be collected.
Yes, so the poll had a sample of 807 registered voters. Now, many people quite often think that, that sounds very small. It can't be a reliable poll. But actually, that reveals a bit of a misunderstanding about how polls work and what makes a poll reliable or not. And it really isn't so much the sample size, although you do need a sample of a relative decent size. What really matters is whether that sample is, number one, random, in the sense that in this poll, all registered voters in South Africa had an equal chance of being included in the survey. And the second part is it must be representative of the country as a whole. And for that, we can look at some of the stats by province. I've got it here, 23.5% of respondents were in Gauteng, 19 in KwaZulu-Natal, 12.5 in the Eastern Cape, 12.1 in Limpopo, and so on. Then we look at where people live, the residential areas. Tribal land, 37.1% of respondents live there. Township areas, 30.3%, suburbs, 18%. Then we also go to age, language. For example, in language, 22% of our respondents were isiZulu speakers, 18.9 isiXhosa, 12.4 Afrikaans, and 12.2 Sesotho. So we go through various layers to make sure that the sample we have is as representative as possible of the country as a whole. It's sort of, if people think about a pizza, you don't need to eat an entire pizza to know what it tastes like. You just need to make sure that you get a slice that's big enough, that has some of the crust, some of the cheese, some of the toppings, and then you've got a good idea what the whole is like. So from the 27th of March to the 3rd of April, this methodology gave us this result.
Herman, you're making me hungry right now just mentioning pizza. But Herman, there's something that you mentioned, 23.5% from Gauteng. Now, this is not discounting the other provinces. The reason why I want to focus on Gauteng, because this is one of the most contested provinces, given that it, of course, is the financial hub of the country. And within that 23.5%, when you look at the data when it comes to the DA and the ANC, it has, of course, the DA just edging the ANC. It was quite reflective of last year's elections, where, of course, the ANC had to form this government of provincial unity. Quite a lot to read from there, isn't there, given the stats that you guys have collected, it's really neck and neck, or just edged, or the DA is just edging the ANC when it comes to that. And Gauteng is going to play quite a huge role, especially ahead of next year's local government elections.
Absolutely. And these populous provinces, your KwaZulu-Natals, your Western Capes, your Gautengs, they are the big, densely populated provinces. So it's really there where the parties can get maximum bang for buck in terms of the resources they invest to gain support. Now, we do not go to a provincial level in our findings. The reason being, at a national level, we have confidence in our numbers, 95% confidence level with a margin of error of 4%. If we go to the smaller groups that you have in the various provinces, that margin of error grows to 5, 6, 7, sometimes 10%. So then it becomes a very difficult tool to use for accurate analysis. But even within that caveat, it is clear that in Gauteng, the ANC and the DA, as nationally, are within a hair's breadth of each other,
Sure, yes.
really breathing down each other's necks and showing why, even in the previous election cycle, Gauteng was such a battleground province.
Herman, I want to touch on it from a obviously national level. Currently, and this occurs most of the times, if not all the times, there are by-elections that happen within various wards, within various municipalities, and this is, of course, an ongoing process. Hence, the beauty of the democracy that we have. How much can South Africans, by just looking at the polling that the IRR has conducted, looking at the stats in itself, how much can they read to what is happening within this by-elections? I ask this because it's very difficult to read into these by-elections, because on one month you could potentially have one party running the actual ward, and then 6 months down the line it's another party that is taking over, because of course so many variants could happen. Service delivery, of course, being one of that. So how much can South Africans read into the poll that your organization has conducted vis-a-vis to currently what is happening with these by-elections across the country?
I would urge people never just to put all their eggs in one basket when it comes to understanding what's going on. An opinion poll is a very useful mechanism, but it is not a prediction or a prophecy. It is a snapshot saying that at we conducted a survey, this is what we found in terms of the political picture on the ground. Now, that picture is a very particular picture because the period that was covered was during this parliamentary budget crisis, when the South African people were really invested in national debate about things like tax levels. That isn't going to be the permanent context of our politics going forward. It does show us what we can be looking forward to. But if it doesn't, this poll will just be an outlier. When it comes to by-elections, what I always encourage people to see in by-elections is the ability of a party to organize, because that's really what a by-election tests. It doesn't test the national support. It doesn't necessarily test the national picture. It tests whether the party can get its ducks in a row and get its supporters to actually get to the ballot box. That is a critical reflection of the general organizational health of a party. So I would urge people, look at the IRR poll, look at the by-elections, look at other polls from the Brenthurst Foundation or Ipsos or SRF, and see if you can spot trends that communicate whether some parties are moving in the right direction and some parties are moving in the wrong direction.
What's interesting about a lot of these polls, Herman, and of course you could speak to it, is that if you measure it from around 2018, when President Cyril Ramaphosa had of course taken over the presidency, the ANC had a fluctuation of its support. We saw last year with various of the polls, and you've mentioned these organizations, it had the ANC of course dropping below the majority level, and of course here we are finding this GNU occurring. Of course, today we saw the DA taking the ANC to court to stop, of course, the VAT increase going up. You saw the EFF, of course, joining as a participant party within this. If we come to a point, and I think all South Africans are hoping that this VAT does not go through, the finance minister has other ideas saying this cannot go through, and of course he has legal reasonings for it. How much of changes are we going to see happening, Herman, whether it's a poll by you or other organizations, continually fluctuate, given that there is a bit of uncertainty occurring right now as we speak with regards to this potential VAT increase?
So we must understand that voters make their decisions to support this or that party on a whole range of bases. It's not just policy, it's not just leadership, it's a combination of that, but it's also those intangible issues of trust. Do we trust this party to deliver from government? And I think the VAT issue is a risk for the ANC, not only because our polling shows it has already eaten into their support base, particularly their support from black voters, but because it might become representative in the mind of the public of a bigger frustration with the ANC when it comes to bread and butter issues. If we look at the 2004 election, the ANC got 70% of the vote at a time when the economy was growing, when unemployment was inching downwards, when housing, electricity, water, service delivery rollout were all gaining momentum. And then the ANC got the benefit of that in terms of record support, even after a decade in power. But what we are now at the risk for the ANC of seeing is that disappointment, that 20 years down the line, the ANC has no longer anything to show for its time in office, except unpopular policies like a VAT increase. It might cut to the deeper core of South Africans simply losing trust in the ANC as a party that is in touch with the people. I recently made this connection or made this comparison. Margaret Thatcher, the long-serving UK Prime Minister, after about 10 years in power, one of her cabinet ministers said she lost her ability to understand instinctively what the public needed. And I think we're at that point with the ANC. They've always had a great connection to the public. That's why they've been this dominant political party. But if they are going one way on the VAT issue and South Africans want to go another way, that is the party starting to lose touch with the feedback it's getting that the people aren't following it there. And the VAT issue is quite clear in the polling. If we look at the three parties, the three big parties that opposed the VAT increase, DA, EFF, MK, all three of them gained support in this poll. And if we look at the three big parties who opposed or who voted for the VAT increase, the ANC, IFP, Patriotic Alliance, all of them lost support. So this VAT issue has clearly cut through in a way that few other issues have. And the risk for the ANC is that that becomes a new normal, that this becomes the catalyst of people saying, I no longer trust the ANC to care about people like me.
Herman, thank you so much for joining us here on News in Focus on Hilaal TV. Much appreciated.
My pleasure.
That's Herman Pretorius from the South African Institute of Race Relations. Yeah, still quite a long time to go before that local government elections. Interesting how this will unfold. After the break, I'm going to be speaking to Dr. Karen Daniels. They're preparing to swim from Bloubergstrand to Robben Island. Yeah, that cold water of the Atlantic. We're going to be discussing why this is going to be taking place. Do stay tuned. We'll have more for you after this break.